How you doing tonight, Chubb Rock?
Pretty good, brother. Pretty good.
It's an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you, brother.
So how you doing during this difficult time? I know with everything going on with the protests and COVID-19.
And trying to be smart about it, trying to be safe. We've had some losses in the family.
Oh, you
Um,
have? I'm sorry to hear
yeah,
that.
and so we're from New York, from Brooklyn.
Yeah.
We had family still there. I'm in Georgia now, but yeah, man, we just have to take it very carefully.
Yeah. You grew up in Kingston, Jamaica. Well, you didn't grow up there, you were born there, right?
No, I was born in Brooklyn.
Oh, you were born in Brooklyn. Okay. Because
I was
I've
born in
read
Brooklyn.
online that you were born in Kingston. That's weird.
No, I was born in Brooklyn, and my whole generation is from Jamaica, and then we lived there when I was a kid. Then came back to the states, and the rest of it was always the states. And of course, just go back and every year to visit.
Mhm.
And my mom had a restaurant there, and a little small hotel there, and so my whole generation is from there.
Okay. And what was it like growing up in Brooklyn?
Oh, during my time, it was incredible. It was incredible. People looked out for each other. Um, we still shoveled the snow for the elderly and stuff like that,
Mhm.
and looked out for people, looked out for your neighborhood. It was a great time, man. Me and my friends talk about it to this day. That Brooklyn upbringing was incredible, incredible, man.
Mhm.
And my assumption is a lot of it is still there. I mean, things have been gentrified
Yeah, I was gonna bring
to an
that up. How do you feel
extreme
about the
level.
whole gentrification?
Yeah, gentrified to an extreme level, but I think it's still there.
Mhm. At what
I
age
think
did you start rapping?
I don't I don't even know, 14, maybe
14.
15. Yeah. My good friend Dave Witt, I don't know, man. He was from a different planet, and I seen him doing it, and he was using a reel to reel. And back then, we used to have this thing called a pause tape, and a pause tape back then there was no samplers. So what you did was you had your record queued up and say it was Good Times, and you want that loop, right? Which is the basis of Rapper's Delight and Treacherous Three and all these other incredible artists that use that music. Now Rogers. So you would have your cassette ready, put it on record, also have the pause button held down, and then when that part that you want, you let your pause button off. It'll then record that loop, and then you press it to stop it, and then you do that over and over about 2 million times, and that's how you would be able to loop the part that you want. And then you would take all of that, put it on the left channel of your reel to reel, and then you rhyme on the right channel, and that's how you kind of came up with your maneuvers there. And I learned all of that from him, Dave Witt. I don't know where he got it from because we couldn't have been more than 14 years old when I seen him do it, and I was like, wow. And that's what blew my mind, the creativity of it all.
The creativity, in my opinion, I've never heard of the pause tape before, and that's very interesting because I feel as though the creativity of hip hop is just gone now. Like when you turn on the radio, especially from the era that you came from, it's just so different nowadays. The hip hop has changed. I'm not a huge fan of the hip hop that's out right now. I get that, like people say, it evolves over time, but it's just gotten so watered down, in my opinion.
Well, you know what happens, man. When we came into the game, I remember this. I mean, I really remember this. I remember there were other musicians, whether from R&B or rock and roll, different places, different genres, that thought that what we were doing wasn't real music. And then you had some that believed what we were doing was based on other people's music,
Mm,
with the sampling and things of that nature. So there was times that they didn't respect what we were doing.
mm,
So, we went through that before. And then, history repeats itself. But, you know, it's like anything else, man. If you're a Yankee fan like I am, then it's all about the 77 Yankees and Bucky Dent and Willie Randolph, and you don't want to hear about anybody else, Reggie Jackson, Thurman Munson. If you grew up for that era and Yogi Berra and all of that stuff. Holy cow. I mean, if you're a New York fan, you know all of these people.
Yeah.
But things happen, times move on. And who knows, man, some of the young stuff that's out now, they could be a debate whether it's hip hop or not. It might be just pop music. It might be its own genre. Maybe it's a different, it ain't really hip hop. You think it's hip hop because of the age of the practitioners doing it, but maybe it's not really hip hop. Maybe it's something else.
Mhm.
Maybe it's its own genre. You just never know. I mean, to me, it's all about what people like. So if you go to McDonald's and you want to try something else besides the Big Mac, that's fine. And if I go to McDonald's and I only want a Big Mac, that's fine too. It's it's different. It's
Yeah.
it's definitely different.
I love going back and listening to your records, especially I Gotta Get Mine, yo. That's my favorite album by you. And just looking back on those times of your old records and listening to the music today, I just feel as though the music of your time had a message, especially during times like these. We tend to go back to listen to Fight the Power, especially during with the protests and everything.
Right,
And
right.
I tend to search for music today that may have a message, and it's just very little out there. Are there any artists today that you're a fan of their music
Oh
that are
yeah.
considered hip hop right now?
Oh yeah, I like Rick Ross. I've always loved Wayne, Little Wayne. Um, I think that Megan Thee Stallion is dope. Obviously Kendrick, um, J. Cole, there's some great stuff out there, great lyricists out there.
Mhm.
And even the generation right before that. Big fan of Ludacris, so I mean there's all kinds of great records out there. I mean, some of them might not be for me or even for others, man, and that's fine. That's fine. That's why I always urge the legends of hip hop to keep making music, because you have an audience that will always be, I only want Slick Rick records. That's all I want to hear. And you want to hear a Slick Rick record, or I only want to hear a Dr. Dre record. I only want to hear a DJ Quick record. I only want to hear a Chubb Rock record. I want to hear a Kid and Play record. That's why there should never be a point where you stop making music. Just like Patti LaBelle still performs and Frankie Beverly still performs and they can make records if they want to because they got an audience. Why would they have to stop? Why would they have
Yeah.
to stop? As long as you give your audience what they want, I don't see the problem.
Mhm. Do you feel as though the youth will consume the older artist music if they were to release it in today's day and time, day and age?
No, probably not. I mean, you got maybe a few that they grew up on certain records and they will be just as big as a fan as I am on some of that music. But their generation might take a second to realize there's nothing new here. There's nothing new under the sun because black and brown people are still going through the same oppressions, and we already see that.
Yeah.
And now there's a new evil out there, COVID-19, and we didn't experience that then. And so I said the same thing as you. Where are the records that timestamp this particular time? Treat 'em Right was about the killing of Yusuf Hawkins. There was, about never forget Yusuf Hawkins. So was Public Enemy's Fight the Power was because of the death of Yusuf Hawkins. And then you have Young, Gifted, and Black, Big Daddy Kane. You had X Clan. You had X Clan. You had their whole movement of X Clan. So you had Rakim with his whole knowledge of self. You have Wise Intelligent and Poor Righteous Teachers. You had so many different records that dealt with, you know, the state of black and brown people in the music. And Queen Latifah
Yeah.
and things of that nature. You don't
Arrested
really
Development.
Arrested Development, Jungle Brothers. You don't really hear it now. Time stamping this particular time. So when a generation or two look back and say, "Man, what was COVID-19? Oh, such and such made a record about it." And that's why I even urge us as the hip hop statesmen or whatever, if you want to call it, to go in there and pen some stuff because you always have to still leave some breadcrumbs. You got to leave some hieroglyphics for future generations to never forget the destruction of COVID-19 and what's going on right now.
Yeah. And I see people on Instagram just ask for where are the records, as in particular Michael Rappaport. He'll go on Instagram and say on videos, where are the records talking about what's going on right now? What happened to the message filled hip hop records that we used to get back in the 80s and 90s? I feel as though we need more of that right now. Like you said, and I know you said that there's older artists that you're urging to, keep creating music. Who are some artists that you're talking to that are from your generation that will be releasing music soon, or that's working on some records?
Well, I know that Slick Rick was working on some records.
Mhm.
I think he was working on a whole album. Um, I got about 2 albums almost done. We're gonna just figure out what we're gonna throw out. Um, Positive K is working on plenty of great music, and in fact, he got a new one out now. Um, and then him and Greg Nice had did a whole project together, and so there's quite a bit. You know, Bumpy Knuckles always comes out with new music. Him and DJ Premier and Ross Cass, and I mean all kinds of brilliant records. Um, So it's out there. Oh, Sadat X, always
Yeah,
with new music. In fact, when I spoke to Sadat the other day, they're working on a new Brand Nubian album because of the times.
we need that right
So
now.
yeah, yeah. And that's what I told him. I was like, totally need that now. Totally. So I was happy to hear about that. But you know, you, it's one thing to put out those records. It's another thing that you have to support those records. And hopefully you will. I know the Grown and Sexy before the pandemic definitely supported those artists when it came to concerts and shows, hands down. Old school concerts did very well, um, but definitely would like to see the support of the music as well.
Mhm. Now, when artists like you drop an album in this generation, what is the best way you feel as though to reach the younger audience so that they do listen to your music? Because that's my goal on my show. I play all old school rappers, and if they drop a new record, I'll play it on my show. What do you feel as though is the best way to reach the younger audience?
I'm not so sure if there's a real need to reach the younger audience. If they search for it, then that's good. Let them search for it, and if they feel that's something for them, then that's fine. Because I've had younger artists do my records over, Treat Them Right, Little Wayne and Nicki, they did it over with Mary, and I mean, and all of that is fine. Um, we have enough of a fan base. You don't really need anyone else. You don't need anyone else. If they search for it, that's fine. If
Yeah,
they stick to the genre of music that they are into, that's totally fine. Everyone should be able to have a piece of it. It's like the rock and roll guys. Whether you're listening to any of the new stuff or you're gonna always want to hear U2, or if you're gonna want to hear even older and go to Phil Collins and Sting and the Police and all that. Rolling Stone, who still sells out everywhere before the pandemic. There's always enough for everybody. There's always enough for everybody.
you're right. I think, if they want to do their research, the younger generation, they have to do it to go back and look for artists like you back in the 80s and 90s. You set the foundation for artists today.
I mean, you have so many artists now are going back to research um NWA because of all the police brutality right now. And they're seeing different signs and they're like, who was that? And what that was a song? And they start to go back and kind of listen and say, oh man, so this was going on in the late 80s, when NWA was out. Oh, of course. So they go back and they research that stuff, or they go and watch Do the Right Thing and they're like, wow, Radio Raheem got choked to death. It's the same stuff, and this movie's from the 80s.
Yeah,
Exactly. So, and then they have a big rundown of people that were killed by the police, the Eleanor Bumpers, and when they start running it down. So it gives the younger generation that have access to research material, right? Because they're the generation of Google.
yeah,
You can get all the information in a hot second. So, it's just you give it time, man. The one thing I've realized is that young people are asking themselves, why is this happening? And when did this start? And what is the reasons? And as they do their research and realize, wait a second, the generation before me had this issue. The generation before that had this issue. And as they keep going back, and then they get to Dr. King's time and Malcolm X's time, and then they go back to Emmett Till's time, and then they go back to the uprising and the burning of Black Wall Street in Oklahoma's time, which was the 20s. I mean, they just see, oh, Jim Crow and Jane Crow, and oh, wait a second. This is a situation that's been going on since slavery and then after post slavery. So, you give them time to understand that the problem, we haven't come up with the right solution for the problem because it keeps on happening. And because I believe the new generation is consisting of brilliant people, brilliant young people, and they have access to social media and they know how to manipulate it in a good way. And, they will definitely look what's going on with the protesting right now.
yeah,
Looting has happened before, it didn't really change much. But the protesting now and some of the stuff, they're changing laws now. They're changing laws in various states and various cities. And I believe that the protesting will continue until maybe there's a blanket law across the country about what the police can and cannot do. And that will be a great change right there. Dr. King would be proud of it.
yeah. Police brutality has been an issue that I've been speaking against for years now. How come it's been such an outrage with this in particular incident with George Floyd? How come we haven't protested like the mass amounts? You've seen all these races out there, white people, black people, Spanish people protesting like in large groups all over the country. Why did it take this one incident in 2020? Because it's been happening for years.
It's been happening for years, but you never seen it up close and personal. You've never watched, except for in a movie, a life taken right in front of your eyes, and it didn't have to happen. They could have just gotten off the guy. He was already in handcuffs and let due process handle itself. But millions, tens of millions of people watched a life just being taken away live on television, basically. And it really did something to people. It did something to me. I know that.
Yeah,
Because you sat there and go, why? What? And then you sit there and go, wait a second. They know they're being filmed and still did it. So you had no remorse. You had no fear that you would be penalized for such a thing. Makes you wonder how many other people you've done this to. And that's the reason why you see from Greece to Africa to, India to everywhere on the globe, they are protesting George Floyd. And now that doesn't bring him back to his family and his children and his siblings. But I think the new energy wants to make sure that it wasn't in vain, that something would change because of this. I think they will change it. I have nothing but faith for the young energy, the young people. I think they're going to change it. You know, I think they're going to change it. They're not afraid, and that is the emotion you definitely have to have a handle on when you're going against the establishment and police and military. You know, it's very proud of the young people that's out there in the on the forefront there.
Yeah. I couldn't believe when Trump, he's really just destroying the country, when he called out the military, because that's unconstitutional. The military isn't supposed to operate on land. So I was very appalled by that.
Well, what happens is he's trying to stick to his narrative because obviously he's back in campaign mode, and his base loves the the showing of military might, especially if it's going to be shown, against black and brown people. The only problem is there's more black and brown people in the military than any other races.
Yeah,
And they're going to go and say, wait a second, we're not going to do nothing to our own people. I mean, they might be, prone to try to keep order. But if there's peaceful protesting going on, they shouldn't be engaging in civilians. Now, police, for whatever reason, have been engaging in people
yeah,
people with peaceful protests in New York, in Buffalo, when they shoved that elderly gentleman down at 70 something years old. He hit his head on the concrete. They're doing it to women in different areas, Wisconsin and Chicago. And I mean, it's really terrible stuff. But